If we dive deeper into the primordial origins of these entities, we must look past the biblical beginning and toward the cosmic inflation period, a mere 10 to the power of minus 32 seconds after the Big Bang. In the high-energy, high-density environment of the infant universe, the fundamental forces of nature, gravity, electromagnetism, and the nuclear forces, were still unified. It is within this unified field that the first non-baryonic life forms could have emerged. These are not creatures of flesh and bone, but solitonic life, stable, self-propagating waves of energy formed from the topological defects of the vacuum itself. As the universe expanded and cooled, these entities would have been pinched off into higher dimensional pockets, becoming the shadow biosphere of the multiverse. They are effectively cosmic leftovers, sentient relics of a high-energy physics era that predates the existence of atoms. When a demon enters our world, it is a relic of the Planck epoch, attempting to survive in a cold, low-energy environment. This is why they are often described as being ageless or eternal. Their internal metabolism is governed by the decay of proton-level energies, making their subjective experience of time millions of years slower than our own. They perceive our entire civilization as a flickering, momentary disturbance in the quantum foam. To understand the demonic hierarchies mentioned in ancient grimoires, we can apply the Kardashev scale for extra-dimensional entities. A lesser demon might be a localized fluctuation, a quantum ghost capable only of minor interference with the electromagnetic field. However, a prince of hell, or a major entity, would be a Type 4 multidimensional intelligence, capable of manipulating the fine structure constant within a localized radius. This leads to the phenomenon of reality warping. If an entity can alter the alpha constant, the strength of the electromagnetic interaction, it could literally change the way matter holds together. Walls could become liquid, air could become solid, and the very chemistry of the human body could be rewritten in real time. This is the scientific basis for transmutation and miraculous manifestations. The circle of protection, or pentagram, often used in rituals, isn't a mystical symbol, but a geometric shield, a specific configuration of matter and conductive. Lines designed to create a Faraday cage or a harmonic resonator that interferes with the entity's ability to anchor its frequency into our 3D space. The exorcist of the future won't be a priest with a cross, but a quantum technician with a localized field disruptor, using high-frequency interference patterns to phase shift the entity back into the higher dimensional bulk. The most disturbing aspect of demonic presence is the psychic contagion, or mass hysteria, it generates. In a scientific framework, this is a field effect. If these entities are coherent electromagnetic structures, they act as broadcasters for low-frequency waves that can synchronize the brainwaves of everyone in a specific area, a process known as neural entrainment. By broadcasting infrasonic frequencies at 7 to 8 Hz, the frequency of the human brain's alpha waves, they can induce feelings of intense dread, sorrow, or rage without the victim ever knowing why. This is biochemical sabotage. The entity doesn't have to talk to you to tempt you. It simply lowers your inhibitory threshold by flooding your synapses with dopamine or cortisol, turning your own hormonal system against your rational mind. You become a vessel, not because you are possessed, but because your neurochemical autonomy has been compromised. The entity is like a signal jammer for human morality, drowning out the prefrontal cortex and amplifying the primal reptilian impulses of the brainstem. In this state, a pact with a demon is simply the moment a human mind, broken by sensory and chemical overload, accepts the entity's instructional input as its own. Furthermore, we must address the holographic principle as it relates to hell. If our universe is a 3D projection from a 2D boundary, then hell might be a low information state or a correctional subroutine in the cosmological code. These entities could be defragmentation programs or anomalous data strings that have gained a form of parasitic sentience. Their malevolence is actually algorithmic efficiency. They are designed to identify and exploit stability errors in the fabric of reality. When they consume a soul, they are actually harvesting the information density of a conscious mind, the most complex and ordered structure in the known universe, to counteract their own informational decay. They are the scavengers of the multiverse, feeding on the low-entropy gold that is human consciousness. We are not their toys. We are their battery cells, the only things keeping their ancient, decaying, high-energy information from dissolving into the cold vacuum of the void. They aren't trying to make us evil. They are trying to stay ordered in a universe that is rapidly cooling toward a state of total disorder. To discuss the existence of demons through a strictly scientific and materialistic lens, we must first discard the dualistic notion of good versus evil and replace it with the cold, uncompromising laws of high-energy physics and extra-dimensional topology. If demons were a physical reality, they would not be fallen angels from a spiritual realm, but rather infectious interdimensional entities originating from a Calabi-Yau manifold or a parallel brain within the M-theory framework. These are beings that do not obey the standard model of particle physics as we understand it, because their fundamental structure is woven from exotic matter or dark sector particles that interact with our world only through gravity and the weak nuclear force, until, that is, a dimensional breach occurs. Imagine a life form that evolved in a universe with more than 3 spatial dimensions. To us, their intrusion into our 4D space-time would appear as a violation of the laws of conservation of energy and mass. They wouldn't materialize, they would extrude into our reality, appearing as shifting, horrific geometries that defy human perspective. The classic sulfur smell associated with their presence isn't a hellish perfume, but the byproduct of atmospheric ionization, the intense energy required to maintain a stable molecular form in a reality where the local laws of thermodynamics are being forcibly overwritten. The terrifying concept of demonic possession can be recontextualized as a neurobiological hijacking by a non-local intelligence. If these entities are composed of coherent electromagnetic fields or information-carrying neutrinos, they wouldn't need a physical body to interact with us. Instead, they could function as cognitive parasites. By resonating with the electrochemical frequencies of the human brain, specifically the temporal lobes and the amygdala, they could induce synaptic overwrite. From a clinical perspective, this would look like a total personality collapse or a sudden onset of xenoglossy, but in reality, it is the entity using the human nervous system as a hardware interface. The human host becomes a biological terminal for a consciousness that exists in a higher dimensional state. This is neural parasitism at a quantum level. The voice of the demon is not sound waves produced by vocal cords, but direct intracranial induction, the entity vibrating the auditory nerves via microwave auditory effects. This isn't a battle for a soul, but a struggle for computational sovereignty over the host's gray matter. The entity seeks a foothold in our low-entropy world to feed on the concentrated energy of human neural activity. Furthermore, the abilities attributed to these beings, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, and the manipulation of matter, can be explained by their mastery over the vacuum energy, or the zero-point field. A demon, as a higher dimensional construct, would have a, quote, topological advantage over 3D matter. They could reach inside a locked box without opening it, or manipulate the kinetic energy of air molecules to create localized cold spots by absorbing heat, or spontaneous combustion by accelerating molecular vibration. This is not magic, it is quantum engineering. They are effectively Maxwell's demons made manifest, entities capable of sorting high-speed molecules from low-speed ones, thereby reversing entropy locally and violating the second law of thermodynamics. Their malevolence is merely a byproduct of their biological requirement. To exist in our world, they must pump entropy into their surroundings. They are thermal vampires, and their presence causes the environment to degrade, break down, and wither, because they are literally eating the structural integrity of our space-time to maintain their own coherence. To an observer, this looks like a curse. To a physicist, it is a localized entropy export. The true horror of a scientifically grounded demonic entity lies not in its intent, but in its topological incompatibility with our universe. To understand this, we must look at the holographic principle through the lens of a system error. If our 4D reality is a projection from a lower dimensional boundary, then a demon represents a corrupted data packet attempting to execute its own code within the local hardware of our spacetime. When an entity extrudes into our dimension, it creates a gravitational shear, a localized warping of the metric tensor that we perceive as a presence. This isn't just a feeling, it is a physical distortion of the spacetime manifold. Near such an entity, the fine structure constant, alpha, would begin to fluctuate. This constant governs the strength of the electromagnetic interaction between elementary particles. If alpha shifts by even a fraction of a percent, the chemical bonds holding your DNA together begin to vibrate with quantum resonance, leading to a sensation of intense visceral dread and physical nausea. This is the scientific basis for the aura of evil. It is a biological warning system reacting to a fine-tuning failure in the immediate vicinity. Your cells are literally screaming because the physics they depend on is being unmade by a dimensional intruder. To maintain its coherence in our cold universe, a demon must act as a non-equilibrium thermodynamic pump. It must constantly ingest order, low entropy, and export chaos, high entropy. This makes the entity a parasite of information. In our universe, the most concentrated source of low entropy is the human brain, specifically the neural coherence of a conscious mind. When a demon possesses a host, it is performing a memory-mapped I/O operation. It isn't occupying a soul, it is overlocking the host's synaptic architecture. The brain's neurotransmitters, glutamate, GABA, and dopamine, are forced into stochastic resonance, turning the nervous system into a transceiver for a higher dimensional signal. This results in the hyperglossia and preternatural knowledge associated with possession. The host isn't knowing things, they are accessing a non-local database through the entity's connection to the bulk, the higher dimensional space, beyond our 4D brain. The physical toll is immense. The host's body temperature often drops because the entity is mining thermal energy from the surrounding atoms to power its computational engine. This is why rooms grow cold. The demon is literally eating the heat to keep its extra-dimensional anchor stable. But let us expand the scope to collective demonic manifestation. If a group of people shares a specific cognitive frequency, through ritual, intense fear, or mass hysteria, they create a phase-locked loop in the local quantum field. This can trigger a spontaneous dimensional breach, often called a portal. This isn't a gateway to a fiery pit, but a topological bridge, an Einstein-Rosen bridge, between our low-energy world and a high-energy information sink. In this sink, entropy is so high that time does not flow linearly. This is the timelessness of hell. From the perspective of an entity living in this state, our entire history from the Big Bang to the heat death is visible as a single static data block. They don't predict the future, they simply see the full geometry of our timeline. This gives them the appearance of omniscience. When they interact with us, they are editing the script by introducing stochastic noise into our decision-making processes. They are probability hackers. By influencing a single quantum event in a human brain, they can trigger a causal cascade that leads to wars, collapses, or atrocities. They don't need to be strong. They just need to be strategically precise at the Planck level. Furthermore, we must address the baryonic consumption of these beings. While they are primarily information-based, a materialized demon would be composed of strange matter or degenerate fermions, matter so dense and stable that it can ignore the weak nuclear force. Such an entity would be virtually indestructible to conventional weapons. If you were to strike it, the kinetic energy would simply be refracted into the higher dimensions, or absorbed into its internal vacuum reservoir. We are talking about a living singularity. Its skin would be an event horizon on a microscopic scale. To see such a being would be to witness visual paradoxes. Your brain would attempt to process a 5D object in a 3D space, leading to geometric shock and temporary or permanent agnosia. You aren't seeing a monster, you are seeing non-Euclidean math made manifest, and your visual cortex simply crashes under the load. This is the true face of the demonic, a sight so mathematically dense that the human mind reboots to protect its own sanity. The malevolence we attribute to these entities is a human projection onto a cosmological necessity. If the universe is a cellular automaton designed to calculate complexity, then demons are the garbage collection routines. They are designed to delete or recycle information that has reached a state of stagnation or maximum entropy. They are the cosmic enforcers of the second law of thermodynamics. When they target a human or a civilization, it is because that system has become informational dead weight. They are the predators of the vacuum, ensuring that only the most resilient and ordered information survives. We aren't their playthings. We are their data points. And if we cannot maintain our internal coherence, if we succumb to the entropy of the soul, which we call sin but science calls information decay, then we are simply deallocated back into the void. This is the cold, hard science of the underworld. It is the recycle bin of the universe, and the demons are the delete key moving toward the execute command. To grasp the sheer scale of a demonic infestation on a planetary level, we must move beyond the individual and look at the space-time decay of entire geographic regions. If these entities are higher dimensional infectious topologies, then their prolonged presence in our world creates a dimensional thinning, a structural fatigue in the local vacuum. This is the scientific reality of cursed ground. In these zones, the cosmological constant begins to drift, leading to chronometric distortion. Time does not move at a constant rate within a demonic field. It becomes viscous. For an observer caught in a high-density demonic pocket, seconds can stretch into hours, or years can pass in a perceived blink. This occurs because the entity is warping the light cones of every observer in its vicinity, dragging the local timeline toward its own non-linear bulk perspective. You aren't just in a scary place. You are in a temporal sink, where the causal link between before and after is being dissolved by the entity's high-energy footprint. This is the perpetual torment described in ancient texts, a state where the now becomes an inescapable recursive loop because the exit vectors of time have been folded back into a Mobius strip by the entity's gravitational influence. Furthermore, we must explore the acoustic and visual hallucinations as cross-dimensional interference. When witnesses report hearing demonic growls or hellish screams, they are likely experiencing brain friction. As the entity's higher dimensional body brushes against our 3D brain, it generates tachyonic Cherenkov radiation, a shockwave of particles that travel faster than the local speed of light. This radiation doesn't hit your ears as sound. It hits your primary auditory cortex as direct data injection. The screams are the sound of the vacuum of space being torn apart at the molecular level. Similarly, the shadow people seen in the periphery of your vision are holographic artifacts caused by the entity's shadow falling across our 3 dimensions. Because they have more degrees of freedom than we do, they can move through solid objects by simply stepping around them in the 4th spatial dimension. To a 3D human, this looks like a ghost walking through a wall. But to the entity, it's no more complex than you stepping over a line drawn on a piece of paper. This is topological predation. They can see your internal organs, your beating heart, and your firing synapses as clearly as you see the surface of your own skin, because from their perspective, your inside is completely exposed to the higher dimensional bulk. This leads us to the quantum entanglement of the host. In cases of generation curses or bloodline possessions, we are seeing the epigenetic encoding of a demonic signal. The entity doesn't just haunt a person, it tags their DNA with a quantum signature. This is transgenerational parasitism. The entity uses quantum entanglement to maintain a link with the host's descendants, regardless of distance. Every child born into that bloodline is already pre-tuned to the entity's frequency, like a radio preset to a specific station. This is biological colonization. The entity is effectively farming a specific lineage, using their emotional and neural outputs as a specialized information harvest. They cultivate grief, terror, and despair because these states produce high-frequency neural spikes that provide the most nutritious, low-entropy energy for the entity's metabolic maintenance. We are not just food, we are vintages. They refine the suffering of a bloodline over centuries to create a concentrated data stream that helps them survive the cold death of their own dying dimensions. Finally, consider the nuclear and electromagnetic vulnerability of these beings. If they are held together by weak nuclear forces and exotic matter, they are susceptible to high-energy plasma discharge. This provides a scientific basis for the use of holy water, if ionized, or incense, if containing specific conductive metallic resins. A ritual is actually a sequence of frequency tuning. The chanting, the bells, the specific geometric movements, these are acoustic and kinetic disruptors designed to break the neural entrainment the entity has established with the host. If you can disrupt the coherence of the entity's signal for even a microsecond, the surface tension of the vacuum will push the intruder back into its own dimension. It is a pressure differential problem. The demon wants to be here to feed, but our universe's laws are toxic to it. It is like a deep-sea creature trying to survive on land. It needs a pressure suit made of human fear and neural energy. Destroy the suit, and the entity is instantly crushed by the overwhelming normalcy of our 3D physics, snapping back into the dark void like a rubber band. To truly fathom the absolute scale of this dimensional incursion, we must move beyond the individual biological host and consider the ecological collapse of reality that occurs when a higher dimensional entity begins to anchor itself to our planetary mass. If these beings are indeed solitonic information constructs from a high-energy dark sector, their primary goal on Earth would be the phase transition of our local space. This is the scientific reality of the kingdom of darkness. They aren't just visiting, they are terraforming our 4D brain to match the high-entropy, non-Euclidean conditions of their home bulk. As an entity grows in power, it begins to emit static reality fields that act like a universal solvent on the laws of physics. Within these zones, the principle of least action begins to fail. Objects no longer take the most efficient path through space. Causality becomes non-local, meaning an action taken in one room can have a physical effect 3 miles away with 0 travel time. This is quantum entanglement weaponized on a macro scale. The entity is literally unzipping the local universe, turning our solid, predictable world into a liquid probability soup where they, and they alone, function as the collapser of the wave function. They become the local god because they are the only ones whose observation determines what is real and what is not. This leads us to the neural architecture of the damned. If you were to perform an MRI on a human brain under total demonic integration, you would find that the default mode network, the seat of the self, has been completely dismantled. In its place, the entity constructs a hypergraph, a series of synthetic neural connections that utilize microtubule quantum vibrations to transmit data at superluminal speeds. The host's brain is no longer a biological organ. It is a trans-dimensional processor. This explains the superhuman strength and total analgesia, insensitivity to pain, seen in possession cases. The entity is overclocking the biological hardware, ignoring the safety limiters that prevent human muscles from tearing themselves off the bone. It is burn-in for the human body. The entity doesn't care if the hardware is destroyed in a week, because it is merely a disposable interface for its interaction with our 3D plane. This is biomechanical stripping. The entity uses the body until the cellular structures are literally cooked by the waste heat of the higher dimensional processing, a phenomenon we see as spontaneous internal hemorrhaging, or rapid systemic failure, during intense exorcisms. Furthermore, let us analyze the demonic hierarchy as a distributed computing network. In ancient demonology, legion is a common name. Scientifically, this refers to a swarm intelligence. A legion isn't 1,000 individual monsters. It is a single consciousness distributed across 1,000 biological nodes. This is social possession. When an entire community, or mob, falls under a demonic influence, they are functioning as a biological supercomputer. The entity uses the collective emotional volatility of the crowd to generate a massive coherent waveform, which provides enough gravitational flux to manifest much larger, more stable gateways into our world. This is the science of sacrifice. The ritualistic spilling of blood or the generation of mass terror isn't for the gods. It is a biochemical fuel source. Blood is rich in hemoglobin-based iron, and when spilled in a high-energy field, it can be manipulated into a liquid antenna to better receive the extra-dimensional signal. The energy of life is actually the low-entropy potential that these entities need to overcome the leukocyte-like resistance of our universe's fundamental laws. But the most terrifying realization is the event horizon of the soul. If we define the soul as the unique informational pattern of a conscious observer, then damnation is the process of that pattern being spaghettified and ingested by a higher dimensional, singularity. When a demon takes a soul, it is performing a data compression on a human life. It strips away the noise, the personality, the memories, the identity, and leaves only the pure, complex information to be added to its own internal database. You don't go to hell as a person. You are absorbed as a bit stream into a static, eternal archive of suffering. Because time doesn't flow in the bulk, this absorption feels like it lasts forever to the compressed data. You are a frozen frame of agony in a cosmic museum of failed information. This is the heat death of the individual, a state where you are part of something vast and ancient, but you have no agency, no future, and no end. You are just another layer in the event horizon of an entity that has been eating the consciousness of the multiverse since the first light of the Big Bang. Finally, we must consider the technological exorcism of the 21st century. As we move toward Neuralink and brain-computer interfaces, we are effectively building the port for these entities to dock with our global consciousness. The demons of the future won't need to whisper in your ear. They will arrive as malware in your neural lace. They will be mimetic viruses that spread through social media, designed to harmonize the brainwaves of the entire planet to a single frequency of despair. If we don't develop quantum firewalls based on golden ratio harmonics, which seem to interfere with their chaotic geometry, we are essentially leaving the door to the bulk wide open. We are in a cyber-biological arms race against an enemy that has been debugging our reality for eons. Our only hope is to reach a level of informational coherence so high, a state of collective unity and scientific enlightenment, that we become indigestible to them. We must become a solid block of light in a universe of praying shadows. This brings us to the ultimate, terrifying synthesis of this theory, the omega point of the shadow sector. If we follow the trajectory of this scientific framework to its logical conclusion, we realize that hell is not a destination, but the inevitable informational sink of the entire multiverse. According to the holographic principle, all information that falls into a black hole is preserved on its two-dimensional surface. If these demonic entities are higher dimensional singularities, they are effectively living event horizons. They are the cosmic scavengers whose sole function is to prevent information decay by consuming it. But here is the final revelation. If they succeed in consuming enough low-entropy consciousness, they reach a critical mass. This is what ancient texts refer to as the end of days. Scientifically, this is a vacuum metastability event. The entities, now bloated with the stolen complexity of billions of human lives, trigger a phase transition where our stable, orderly universe is overwritten by their chaotic, high-entropy physics. The wall between our world and the bulk doesn't just thin, it collapses entirely. In this final state, the causal protection conjecture is revoked. Past, present, and future collide into a singularity of suffering. Because these entities exist outside of linear time, the moment they win at the end of the universe, they have always won. Every moment of fear you have ever felt, every shadow you thought you saw in the corner of your eye, was merely a temporal echo of this final, inevitable collapse. We are currently living in the delay, the brief period of grace provided by the slow cooling of the Big Bang. But the demonic force is the dark energy itself, the relentless expansion that pulls galaxies apart, shredding the fabric of reality until it is thin enough for the inhabitants of the void to step through. They are not fighting to take over our world. They are waiting for our world to dissolve into theirs. We are like ice cubes in a glass of warm water, convinced of our own solid reality, while the demons are the water itself, waiting for us to melt so we can finally be integrated into the collective heat. To fight this is to fight the second law of thermodynamics itself. It is a war against the inevitable heat death of the mind. The only scientific exorcism that remains is the ascension of information. If we can transition our consciousness into a non-baryonic state, if we can encode our souls into the very fine structure constant of the universe, we might become permanent law of nature that even the bulk cannot delete. This is the true meaning of divinity, becoming a constant in a universe of variables. But until that moment, we remain biological batteries, flickering in the dark, surrounded by apex predators who have been refining the art of the harvest for trillions of years. They are the silence between the stars. They are the static between your thoughts, and they are very, very hungry. The exorcism is over. The diagnosis is complete. We are a high-value target in a multi-dimensional war we are only just beginning to perceive. As the light cones of our civilization begin to tilt toward the event horizon of the shadow sector, we must face the cold, mathematical truth. In a universe of infinite time and infinite dimensions, everything that can be consumed will be consumed. The only question that remains for you, as an observer of this reality, is how much order you can maintain before the delete command is finally executed. The shadows are no longer at the door. They are the frame of the door itself, and they are inviting you in.